record button. And okay, now I'll do like a introduction again. So yeah, Holly's going to talk about Web3 today and some of the technology that she's been working on, I think as part of her fellowship. And yeah, just kind of excited to talk about the decentralized web and, that technology that is kind of buzzwordy, but hopefully has some practical usages as well for Native people. So you can take it away, Holly.
Okay. Yat esh ke do Diné Holly Grimm Unishe Bitani Nishli Biligana Bashichin Tachini Dashichedo Biligana Dashinale. So yeah, thank you so much, Adam, for inviting me. Let's see, I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. So as Adam mentioned, he invited me to speak a little bit about my fellowship. And basically, I'm a software developer for 25 years, and I'm now retooling to develop blockchain projects. And I'm mostly interested in indigenous and environmental platforms. I just finished my Kernel Block 2 fellowship, which is about learning and building in the blockchain space. And I'm also part of two DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organizations. One is NFDAO, and that's a grant giving DAO for NFT projects and artists. And I'm also part of Meta Gamma Delta, which is a DAO to support women in blockchain development. So the first thing I thought I would do is go over a little bit on the tech. And basically, a blockchain is a large-scale, secure, time-ordered database that uses cryptography. So the first step is that a sender, there's a transaction between a sender and a recipient, and that message is signed with a private key. It is then bundled into a block, and that block is sent into a peer-to-peer network of nodes, which then agrees or disagrees to add it to the blockchain ultimately. And so there's a few different ways you can do consensus. One is through proof of work, which is what Bitcoin and Ethereum uses. And then there's a proof of stake, which is the future of Ethereum, along with other methods of doing it. So then once the block has been validated, it's then added to an immutable ledger, and that's where it's and so using a hash, it points back to the previous block, and so that's a way of basically keeping track of making sure that these different blocks, are always going to stay the same or be immutable. So then once it's complete, the sender, the money, or the whatever it needs, whatever the transaction is, happens. So you can put this blockchain in a private situation, or you can put it in a public situation. So really, in the public decentralized network is really where you're getting the full aspects of it. And so for instance, you could address corruption. So there's inaccurate record keeping, right? So you could do that, but if you use the blockchain, you could place immutable tamper-proof records out there. And then there's a lot of in-person transactions happening. And so you can, by placing these on the blockchain, then suddenly they're traceable and you can see them. There's a lot of centralized control and information access right now on the Web 2 world. And so if you're working with a peer-to-peer network, now this information has now been decentralized. And then also maybe a large corporation may have a lot of private records, and so they have a low public accountability. And so if this information is on the blockchain, then it starts to become transparent. So why are centralized platforms bad? They basically serve as an intermediary that extracts value and excludes people. So for instance, Vice had an article on January 15 about indigenous beaters that are getting dropped by Instagram. They were selling a lot out there. They got highlighted by the New York Times. And just like 2 weeks later, suddenly they started getting dropped. This is Malka Matur and her piece here, beating piece. And they were selling a lot on Instagram, and Instagram, I think, wanted them to use their own marketplace. And so that was why they were dropped. So native cryptocurrencies, why would you want to do those? You could reduce predatory lending. There was an article in 2008 about predatory lending in Native American communities, or a paper. And you could also stop economic leakage. And so the money would stay within the tribal, tribal area, worlds. And then you could also help the unbanked people. A lot of our reservations don't have banks or, any access to banks. So Mazda Coin was one of the first cryptocurrencies developed in 2014. And that's a proof of work blockchain that was built by Payu Harris, and he's Ogallala Sioux. And he's still working with this blockchain. He's working with the Economic Development Administration Joint Project. So another example of a community currency is the community inclusion currencies that's being done in Kenya. So you have the donor funds coming in. You have your network token called a Serafu, and then that breaks up into these smaller tokens, which are based on chamas in Kenya. You could call them tribes. And so these community tokens then go into the chama, and then they can use it to pay for farming, labor, education, vendors, health. And so this is a successful project that's happening out there on the blockchain with these community tokens. And you can go to grassrootseconomics.org to look a little bit more about what they're doing. So as part of my fellowship, they focused a lot about value, trust, these sorts of principles about building behind Web3. And so this is Eleanor Ostrom's 8 Principles for Managing a Commons. And so I'll just let you guys read it. I'll take a break. So you can see that it's really about creating smaller groups that have similar values, and that they've created rules and and systems for working together. So we all know the internet, and then I mentioned the blockchain, which was first built by Bitcoin using just a digital currency, and so it wasn't doing anything other than digital currency. Ethereum comes along, and they build smart contracts on top of it, and that allows you to program, basically place Turing complete programs on the blockchain. And so what that has allowed you to do is to build some really interesting decentralized apps on top. And so, for instance, here's CryptoKitties. You can actually go out to Etherscan, and you can view the full contract and see all the functions, everything that happens out there. So that's what they're talking about, transparency. And then you can also look at every single sales of this particular, these particular CryptoKitties in this case. And another example of something you could build a DApp would be a decentralized autonomous organization. I mentioned that already. So that's organized behind. There's a smart contract that it's built upon, and a lot of them are built on reputation, value distribution, voting, and fast evolution. So here on the right is a Moloch DAO. This is a particular type of DAO contract that they've built. And so you can see where you can submit a proposal, and you can add how much money you'd like for that proposal. You can sponsor them and submit a vote on that. So a DAO is interesting because it's an organization that's decentralized. It's transparent, so everything is out there on the blockchain. There's censorship resistant. You could validate participation, and then the governance is autonomous, meaning the members govern, and it's not an elect group. So you could have, for instance, a reputation DAO. So an example of that would be like if maybe Adam, because of all his efforts in natives in tech, he could have kind of a larger amount of tokens than some of us. And then he would have his reputation is higher in the DAO. And so when he votes for these different projects, let me move to the next screen here, he would vote for maybe a development proposal. He'd have more say on these different DAOs. I mean, these different proposals. So for instance, like say if we created something for the native beaders, one thing that they could do is they could have something like a beadwork presentation proposal, and then a granting org would put money into the funding pool. You would pay out to these proposals that are voted on, and maybe even have NFT sales of the beadwork in which 95% goes to the artists, and then 5%. So 95 to the artist itself, and then 5% back to the funding pool. Or we could have a natives in tech DAO. Again, granting organizations, and there's actually quite a few out there. And the more positive work you do in the community, the more funding you can get out there in the Ethereum world. And so you start with a granting organization, and then you can start paying money out to maintaining the website or public presentations, and then the members of Natives in Tech would vote on these different proposals. I didn't really explain what a multi-sig wallet is. That's a multi-signature wallet where maybe 5 or 10 members have access to kind of the main wallet or funding pool wallet, and a majority of them have to agree whenever there's any payments being made. And I'm also working on what's called a Dynamoculture Dao. This is just a design for a platform where you would have tokens for service in specific environmental categories. So for instance, if you built a water harvesting project, or if you were working on a clean air or carbon, maybe planting trees for carbon credits, you would get service tokens that equal the amount of work you do. And so then when a proposal comes through for a solar array, you could vote based on your different tokens. And so a solar array obviously would be good for carbon credits. And so you could vote more for that. And then, or a proposal for water harvesting would have probably higher water votes. And so it's a way of kind of dynamically balancing these different environmental categories on different proposals. Let's see. So, a lot of people are concerned about kind of the legality of these DAOs. And so recently, Wyoming has clarified the legal status of DAO in their state. And so they'll be registering them as limited liability companies. So this is pretty good news. For like, if you wanted to create your own DAO, you would probably first get an LLC in Wyoming. And so Desiree Kane, she just posted on the Natives in Tech, and she was talking about a Clubhouse group called the Grinding Stone, and she wants to do a financial literacy week where she's basically talking about land back crypto and blockchain. And so if you wanted to get in touch with her, you could do that too. And I think that this seems pretty interesting. Possibly using crypto to get land back. So, all right, well, that's all I have for now, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Holly. That was awesome. It was so interesting. And I think I'm going to sign up for that class, because that last one is the thing that I think is most interesting, which is like, how can this intersect with tribal sovereignty, and particularly just like getting tribal governments to start at least thinking about like blockchain technologies and what these technologies can do, both positively and negatively in our tribal communities. So that sounds like a really interesting topic. Have you seen tribal governments anywhere starting to think about these, or any tribal projects thinking about blockchain
Yeah,
technology?
so I think the Ogallala Sioux tribe is the only one so far, but I don't know, like, it seems like to me that you would almost want to go through like NARF or something to start going through the legal aspects of it. But I do agree that, I mean, the tribal sovereignty aspect of it, definitely, it makes perfect sense for the tribes to start looking into different cryptocurrencies. And I did do a search recently, actually just today, and they have one it looks like it's just specifically for tribal gaming. And so that's kind of an interesting, usage too. I remember, way back when they first started the gaming compacts and everything, that there was a question about, money flows and that sorts of things. So but there was also a question too, like, every blockchain that comes about, every group that comes about, you have to also look at it, and try to understand if they're legit or not too. So yeah, so that's kind of that's a question too in my mind. So
yeah, when you were talking about like the like the Mazda coin, the first thing I thought of is my tribe is right now going through setting up a resort, casino gaming facility. And so we're starting to think about like revenue allocation and per cap and general welfare benefits and all those things, and figuring out like how to distribute them to tribal members. And so just it made me think what an interesting idea would be if we got to the point where we could think about these alternative currencies as a way of distributing those revenue. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, what is the biggest problem is really just is trust, right? And so how do you get somebody who really doesn't understand the blockchain, or or doesn't, isn't really familiar with in general with coding, or how do you get them to feel comfortable and and realize that this is actually a better way of storing your money, and yeah, so I think that would be kind of the biggest problem right now. And so that's why I wanted to talk to the developer side, because then as we develop more and more experiments and projects, then the more people will be more comfortable with having their own wallet, and knowing, kind of understanding that this is a great way to store value. And yeah.
Can you unpack, I don't, like cryptocurrencies taken flack from an environmental perspective for like the carbon footprint that goes into maintaining these systems, right? Like it's secure, and all the stuff can be verified because there's 1,000 different computers that all store the same thing. Is that being unpacked within this, or where is that at? Because I can anticipate that being a thing that's going to come up, particularly in our communities.
Yeah, so so there's a couple answers to that. Well, I'm working mostly in the Ethereum chain, and so that's something that they're fixing. It's a process of they have to go through steps before they get to this point, but it's called proof of stake, and you can use little Raspberry Pis basically to be a staker. And the idea is that you place 32 ETH and you become a staker basically out there, and you validate transactions. And so I think it's a brilliant way of doing it. And I think it's going to go down like 1% of the electric costs on that. So so that's the first thing, is that they are fixing that. The second is that I think NFT has got a lot of flack for this, but I think that, in terms of, you don't want to, when you look at environmental impacts that a person has, every person, I think, has their individual things that they can do, right? They can stop driving, they can maybe have fewer children, they can, not fly, those sorts of things. So I think that, I think it's important that you bring up that aspect of it. But at the same time, maybe you're a sculptor or something, and you're going to, create a huge sculpture. That's definitely going to have a lot more environmental impact in terms of shipping that across, shipping it to wherever, versus a smaller NFT. So I think everybody, I really don't believe it's a problem. And but I think that, like you were saying, is that, sorry, sometimes when you make a technological innovation like an electric car, right, there's issues like the lithium battery aspect of it and mining. But I think ultimately is that you have to try to make some movement towards a positive goal, and then over time you eventually be able to to fix the other issues associated with it. And I think Ethereum's doing that. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'm on board that it's an engineering challenge around the power consumption. And I didn't know about the Raspberry Pi things, and that's exciting for me on multiple levels because I would love to upgrade my graphics card, and that's not possible right now because of miners.
Oh yeah, yeah, I know. So yeah, hopefully that should help. Yeah, I understand. They're very expensive right now, GPUs. So,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, and also like Raspberry Pis are incredibly affordable and just keep getting better, right? Like they now have 8 gigs of RAM and can, run a home server. You can't do everything for a home server, but it can do a lot of things. So yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So Holly, this is Dominic. I'm real curious. You did mention the Washington State treatment of these organizations. Are they just loose organizations, or do they ground it somewhere? Because really, in order for Wyoming to, force them to register as an LLC, it's a foreign corporation probably, or a foreign registration as opposed to in-state, unless it's in-state. So I mean, and you'd have to have at least some kind of physical presence, I would think. So it's kind of interesting the convergence of this and how it's going to play out, because, well, not only that, but also the taxation of cryptocurrencies as well is being more treated like property than a currency. So I guess my general question is these DAOs, they're just groupings of people that want to form something.
Yep, that's right. And so yeah, so we could do one for natives in tech pretty easily, and or like I said, any group of people together could start to form something together like this. And one reason to do it would be to get some of these grants from these other organizations. And yeah, so it's a lot of people were already creating their LLCs in Wyoming. A lot of these crypto companies, just because they were already kind of supportive of the crypto world. But then there's internationally, a lot of people are going to Singapore, and then they're also going to the British Virgin Islands to set up their corporations. So it's interesting how, and basically, like you're saying, is that it's a virtual group. It could be, and so that's, so you can kind of, yeah, you're getting less and less a sense of locality with these groups. So yeah.
Thanks, I learned something.
So it seems like a lot of these organizations are going the like corporation route. Are their DAOs set up as 501c3s, or is the regulations around 501c3s too rigid for what DAOs require?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of people didn't even have any sort of legal back. But then the U.S., I think the U.S. government is really trying to, starting to wants people to have that. And so yeah, there are some nonprofits also out there, so you can kind of use whatever method is best. But I think that the Wyoming LLC might be a really good way to go with it right now. So
Is Wyoming trying to be the Delaware of cryptocurrency?
I think so. And I think they were already the Delaware of like cheap places, in terms of, where to set up your corporations. Because I know, I used to hear Delaware all the time, but now everybody's moving to Wyoming. And now they're even, the cryptocurrency guys are moving out there. Some other interesting things too is that I was part of ETH Denver, and that's and the state of Colorado has a lot of, I think I can't remember, Secretary of State or somebody like that is very interested. She's from, I think, where is she from originally? I think she's might be Taiwanese, but she's done some work with the Ethereum Foundation, and so she's interested in getting the state of Colorado kind of on board on these different projects too. So that's, so there are a lot of, and I know that Vitalik was talking with, he didn't mention what international which nation he was talking with, but they're also interested in start creating their own cryptocurrencies also. So there's a lot of movement, I think, in terms of people trying to legalize it within their communities. Yeah. So have you heard of ETH Denver, Ian? Okay.
Yeah, have it. I'm up in Boulder. I don't go down to
Yeah.
Denver much. I'm branching out though. I need to know more things.
Yeah, yeah. There's actually a couple interesting blockchain developers up there in Boulder too. So yeah, I can connect you with them if you ever wanted to look into doing some more work in this area.
Yeah, I am very curious, but it's also one of these things where it's like I can code, but I'm just not at that comfort. Like I feel what you're saying, where it's like the miss or not having a clear understanding of it causes a lot of pause for people.
Yes.
And that's kind of where I'm at, because I've tried to like go down the path of signing up for something, because then I'm like, there's this wallet and then there's that wallet, and I don't know who talks to who, and I follow enough news to know that there's some like bad places to go, or not upfront about how they're managing the wallets and all that kind of stuff. And so I agree with the transparency aspect, and I think that's, I don't know if it's marketing or education or in what way that goes down, but those are open questions that I have, even though I think I should have some of the technical skill to get at it. But for all I know, I don't even have the technical skill to get at it just yet.
Definitely. And so I think maybe that Desiree's class might help too. But yeah, it would be nice to have something along those lines too. So yeah, we could. Yeah. What do you think, Adam?
Still new to all of this, but yeah, it seems really interesting, and it would be helpful for at least people to be educated about this space. I think, yeah, I kind of played around with it a little bit a few years back, but nothing like too serious. But yeah, I'm just really, yeah, interested in hearing about it. I'm not as into it as other people, but it seems interesting, and I think developing on the blockchain is also new, not necessarily easy, or like, I do mostly web development, so it'll be, I think, some time before it becomes simpler just to be able to build something and have something shipped. I'm sure there's like different ways to do it. But yeah, there's like a whole ecosystem that I think is still growing right now, and that we'll reap the benefits of, I think, in a few years.
Yeah, definitely. And it would be nice if we could, have some native developers though in the space, and so we can kind of shape it. So I think that'd be pretty cool. So, and it is interesting. Like you could have something like, you could have like an 18-year-old, write a smart contract and put it out there, and right now, so it's quite amazing what he could build a whole DeFi or decentralized finance project out there. So it's these are things that people normally wouldn't have access to, this level of technology out there. So
Yeah, and that's something that I find particularly exciting, right? Just in like, if just down to like publicly accessible information, like tribes struggle with that. I feel like my tribe struggles with that. They do it really well for people like at home, right? They'll put it on the radio and they'll post up the papers somewhere. But from a technological standpoint, they put it on Facebook. And there's a number of people that are becoming increasingly wary of Facebook, or they're all in, right? And so you're definitely leaving out a certain, segment of your membership. And, it'd be nice to just tell them that, hey, here's a place where you can just post everything and it's going to be available to everyone. And, it's as easy as filling out a form for you, which, from a web perspective, right, there's a lot of infrastructure that goes into that if some people are creating their own standalone stuff for every single tribe or every single tribal entity. And so, yeah, I find that a pretty fascinating aspect of this, and just to make that part a little bit easier.
yeah, like the Navajo tribe, we got quite a bit of funds during the COVID, and like how do you get that to people? A lot of people they had to fill out a form and then say how they were impacted, and then they would get a check or something. But if you had it within a some sort of DAO or along, some along those lines, you basically could just push it right out to their wallet immediately, and you would already, that all that information also would be available for people to look at and see how the Navajos, spent that money, or, how they, distributed it to the different people. So, yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about, so I kind of understand the theoretical basis of it, but like, let's say just for conversation's sake that we were like making a natives in tech DAO, what would that process even look like?
Yeah, so a lot of us kind of already know each other, and so what what we would do is we would start with kind of maybe Adam would be one of the first members, and then he would begin to process proposals for membership that as we passed them in, and then there would he knows quite a bit of us already about us, and so he would just okay these the people that have already put some service into natives in tech. So all of us would eventually start getting tokens, and we could get tokens for different services. For instance, like if we were putting a presentation together, or if we let's see, worked on the website or wrote some code. You suddenly you start getting more and more reputation tokens within the organization. Then I mentioned these granting organizations. They might, and I know that we get some grants too for natives in tech for different things, and those would all go into this funding pool basically, and people would then start putting proposals together for different projects that they wanted to work on, and they could get funded that way. The other thing we could do is kind of a universal basic income almost, where there's at the end of the year we have extra money, you just spend, hand that out to the members, and so there's a lot of ways that you could work with it. There's a group in Albuquerque. They do kind of the empathetic. Let's see. Let me think for a second. They're working kind of with the homeless and with people who have substance abuse disorders in Albuquerque, and it's basically like a gym, and then they also have different places where the people can come in and store things, or they can shower, or the more service, the more activities they do, like maybe they'll go to a meeting, or they'll work with the counselors. They can they're incentivized to do these things because they can get a massage once a week if they do that. So it's almost like it's a spa basically for kind of the indigent people of Albuquerque. And so this is a similar thing where you basically they could have tokens, right? And maybe eventually be able to spend those tokens for food or for other things. So there's a lot of different ways you can. It's called tokenomics, is the way you design these things, basically, right? It's like how do we incentivize? How do we treat value? How do we work with trust? And so yeah, and yeah, I guess I didn't kind of going back to kind of the natives in tech. We would probably have meetings on kind of what do we value, what do we, what interests us, what's important to us, and so then we would try to understand kind of where that all fits together, and how we're going to incentivize people to be part of the family, and yeah, so.
So interesting. And I know nothing about like the actual coding side of it. The only, I guess, like blockchain or decentralized thing that I've worked with is interplanetary file system, just because it was kind of a low barrier for entry. But is it like, how do you build it? What technologies do you use to build it? I don't know what Ethereum is, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so I mentioned the smart contract, and they have kind of a standard. They have tools out there. They have different DAOs that you can, so for instance, DAO House is one of them, and I can maybe I'll Yeah, I'll share my screen here and then let's go ahead and look at that. Okay, so this is, I mentioned the Moloch DAO. That's a specific type of smart contract that they built. And basically these are the different DAOs that are using this smart contract and this platform called DAO House. And so this is Meta Gamma Delta. This is the one that I was mentioning that I'm part of that supports women-led projects. Let's see, so you can look at the proposals. Here are member proposals here, people that have voted. You can see this person came in, Como ETH, and they they have a description, and they put in a tribute of a certain amount of money, and then they were voted yes and voted in to the membership. So this is one tool that you can use. There's several of them out there, and they all have different aspects to them and how voting works. They get some very interesting ways of voting and that people have come up with, even like emoji voting or even conviction voting. You know, they just have a huge list of different ways that you can start to work with people out there. So yeah, it's quite you know, it's definitely the Wild West out there, but it's really a fun space to be in right now. So yeah.
I'm curious on these DAOs, how they handle bad actors or untrustworthy people once you've discovered that, or if everyone just remains trusted forever. So I mean, it's a group dynamic, I guess.
Yeah. So, you know, what sort of things could happen if you were a bad actor? Maybe, so one thing that maybe if 50% of you all join into this DAO, right? And you decide, okay, we're going to make a proposal to push all the money to us, right? That would be one case where you know you're getting a whole bunch of bad actors joining in. So that's kind of where these membership proposals have to be um, have to be voted on. And so that's an important, you don't just let anybody in. And you'll probably want to say, we have to have some sort of understanding of who this person is, what tribe they're part of, those sorts of things, right? So before we pull those people in. There's also there's different ways of, you can quit the DAO. So for instance, you know, if I wanted to cash out right now, I could out of the DAO if I disagreed with it. And so that would be another aspect of it, is that if I'm a bad actor, it probably just makes sense for me to cash out and take some money with me. And you know, if I disagree with kind of where the group is going. So but in most cases, I think that those sorts of things don't happen because you know, everybody's working as a community together, you know. So
Have there been models where what you pay in is not financial?
let's see, I'm not sure, but you know, I think some of these tributes are very small. So, you know, like you could just put $1 in or something just to show that, yeah. But I don't know too much about other ways of getting in without doing that, because I think really the main thing being that, you know, there could be bots out there, right? We're in a virtual world. And so you want to definitely, you don't want just people to be spamming you with a whole bunch of proposals, right? So, yeah.
Well,
So
I guess like
mhm.
what you mentioned, like creating one for natives in tech and like as like a voting type of system and so on and so forth, right? Like it's right. If we're gonna take like the, I don't know, sophomore in high school that, you know, is a member of natives in tech and give them a place within this, and they just don't have the funds to buy in, right? Like what would that look like for our community and a community in general? And so in my mind, I was like, you know, I contribute 10 hours of my time towards a technical project for my community. And so it's like your buy-in is goodwill and giving back.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of like our it's kind of what we do, right? Like that's
Yeah.
that's a central thing around natives in tech, at least by my viewpoint of it, of, you know, we all got these things going on, but they're all to benefit our communities. And that is kind of a proxy for, you know, like, at least for my view, like stature within the community, right? Like, oh, this person's posting a lot, they're doing some cool language stuff, and oh man, I want to do that too. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's that viewpoint of it. And so I'm curious, like what, I don't know how that might work, you know, considering, you know, limited financial means of a lot of people, um, and how this could be used to leverage other things besides, you know, just a funding model, and how it might be stretched in that way. And so, given that, what are alternatives for, you know, the tribute, or
Yeah.
is that the term you called it?
Yeah, they called it tribute, but I think, yeah, I
Okay.
have seen where they have people that can join as non-voting members, like you're mentioning, and then they could, you know, work do their services necessary to get to that point, or yeah, or to pay off that tribute to become a member. Or, you know, the other thing we could do is we could just airdrop them, you know, the $10 or whatever to their wallet, and, you know, so that could be part of the project, you know, so that they can then go in and create a membership proposal. So those sorts of things, you know, there's different ways to handle that. Yeah, so there's so many different token economics ways of, you know, other than, this is a very simplistic DAO that I showed you guys, but you could definitely start working with universal basic income. You could kind of, you know, like I said, NFT income and those sorts of things to try to come up with different ways of um, like you said, you have a service that's not necessarily monetary, right? But then you can, you know, this person then has reputation within the group for the efforts they put in. So yeah.
Yeah, sorry, my brain was like flying, trying, trying to make sense of things, right? And like what is valued within communities, and how might people be able to take that value if it's not monetary, and, you know, become part of this system.
Yeah, and so that's where this community inclusion currency that I mentioned, like in Kenya, is like, they, you know, if you can, so for instance, say their national currency is failing, right? But there's still a farmer there, there's still a fisherman there, there's still, you know, somebody, all these people, there's no money going around because they're this. But if you can create this community currency, then suddenly people can begin to trade these items, you know, within the, you know, their own. It's almost like a barter, right?
Yeah,
And
that term popped up in my head as you were going through stuff. It's kind of like a digitally regulated bartering system, where there's a, you know, community agreed upon set of contracts for what things are worth what. And if those things are going to change, right, it's almost kind of like breaking out of, I don't know enough about economics to say like it's not capitalism where like the market drives it, but like people need to agree that, you know, if you're going to make milk go from $2 to $10, there has to be community input into that, and someone can't just charge that, and if people pay it, then they pay it, and if they don't, then the company, you know, fails, then our only milk producer is like gone. And so there's more community input into it.
yeah, that's right. And so, yeah, I've kind of become an armchair economist just because you have to, you know, you start learning about all these, they're talking about bonding curves and, you know, all these things that I've never really even thought about. But yeah, once you start getting in there, then you start realizing that it is important to think about money and banking and value and trust and all these concepts. And if you can define those, start to define them even within your own mind, then you can, you know, kind of realize what's important. So yeah.
So it seems as though we've maybe completed the Q&A session, and we can stop the recording and just kind of have like a free discussion. So I'll stop the recording now.